So thank you very much for joining us, and just a warm welcome to our four Old Stithians who join us this evening from all over the world. To start off with, I'd just like to share with you the story behind our initiative, Pass the Mic. It is a new initiative which is aimed at promoting conversations, especially during this time, around the arts and how the arts may be used as a platform to engage with societal issues, such as racism, gender-based violence, homophobia, and all of the other phobias as well. So I look forward to having quite a rich discussion with everyone. Without any further ado, I am going to introduce our panelists to you, and please note that I just went from the oldest person all the way to the youngest, so it is in that order. And we are going to start off with Thando, who matriculated in 2011. Thando is a world-acclaimed actress and deviser. Her work thrives as a cross-cultural experimentation, overlapping and collage, and is always a result of collaboration. I'm sure some of you know of the Fees Must Fall movement, and her play, The Fall, deals with all of this. So thank you very much for joining us, Thando. Next up, we have Veliswa Mehana, who is a matriculant from 2012. Veliswa is a light-driven spiritual woman who is versatile in the music industry as a singer-songwriter, executive producer, and concert creator. So Veliswa, thank you very much for joining. We also have Kuma Masaka, who matriculated from the Girls College in 2013. Khumo is a passionate clinical psychotherapist who works with Black and Indigenous people of color at a sexuality and gender expansive therapy practice in New York. And thank you for joining us. Khumo, what is the time there, if I may ask?
It is 12:04.
It is 12:04 all the way there. So thank you for joining us over your lunch break. And last but not least, we have Gabriella Fedetto, who matriculated in 2007. Gabby is currently a student at Stanford University in California. She is she's studying towards a double major degree in both visual arts and artificial intelligence. And Gabby, thank you very much. We are also very lucky to have Gabby on our shores, and we also wish you a safe return back to your studies next year. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. At this point, if this was live, I'd actually ask all of you to give us a round of applause, but you can do that in your head. So let's start off the conversation, everyone. And I'm going to ask all of the panelists in no particular order just to share their story with us. And within your story, please tell us a little bit more about yourself, why you chose to take either music, dramatic arts, or visual arts at St Stithians College, and more about the work that you do. Khumo.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll start. Hi, everyone. What did I do when I left Saint? So when I finished in 2013, I went overseas. I came here and started my first year in 2014. I wanted to do broadcast journalism. I hopped around a bit. I was like, well, I want to study drama. I want to study performance. And then I came upon broadcast journalism, and then somehow that led me to psychology. And I think, you know, part of my wanting to study it was just because I really was fascinated by people's stories. And I think that's also part of why I took drama. I used to write stories when I was a kid. I would buy those paperback hardcover books from CNA and literally write a whole storybook. And I think I really was fascinated by the idea of making up stories and living out things that I wished would happen. And I think drama kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of bring that to life. And so I kind of think that even in studying psychology, I was really interested in the diversity of stories that people have to tell and how intricately different they are. So, I mean, I didn't really know what I wanted my specialty to be when I first got into psychology. I knew that I wanted it to be clinical. I wanted to do therapy with people. But I think when I first took a Women and Gender Studies intro course, I started to learn a lot about the intricacies of gender and sexuality. I think I'd always felt that there was something missing about the way that I understood gender and sexuality. I felt like what I knew about it was very limited based on like what I was learning. And I think because I was in another country, it was just kind of like, oh, it's just like how America works. They have like more expansive ideas about things. But I think kind of learning more about it got me really interested in it because I wanted to understand why it is that we felt the need. I felt like I didn't really fit into all of those categories of like what femininity is, what, you know, sexuality and gender means for me. And I felt like, you know, there was a niche that was kind of missing about the way that we understand gender and sexuality in South Africa. So that's kind of what fueled my interest in serving queer people, and I think even more so people of color, just because I felt like my culture and my tradition, my ethnicity kind of brought up its own ideas about what it means to be a woman, what it means to be straight, what it means to be, you know, all these different things. So I think the particular experiences of people of color is really interesting and important to me because I think that we're the most, like, some of the most diverse people are parts of these communities, and there's space to kind of create and understand sexuality and gender in a very different way. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Khumo. Wow, what an impressive CV you have there. And I'd just like to move over to Gabby now, and I'd just like to acknowledge a mistake I made. Gabby did not matriculate in 2007. She matriculated in 2017. So I do apologize, the online nerves did get to me there. And yeah,
No
Gabby,
problem.
please do share your story with us.
Yeah, well, yeah, just thank you so much to everyone who's sort of shown up, come to spend their time. So it's taken me a sec to get to, you know, feeling like I'm in a degree path that I'm like actually sort of comfortable with and like confident that I can proceed down, you know, this path. I studied, after I matriculated, I studied at UCT. I studied mechatronics there for about a year while I was in the process of applying overseas. And I found the curriculum just to not have anything in the arts, even from an elective like perspective. I couldn't really branch out all that much. And so that's why I ultimately applied to the US. I needed, just sort of for my like sanity, I just needed to have both art and like STEM, sciences or engineering, in my life. Otherwise I go a bit batty. And then so I took visual art in matric, and I guess the reason I would say, you know, why it was so important to me to take that class, like, because it is a time investment. Anyone who takes it knows it's a time investment. Is that it was the one place where I could sit down and deal with things that were mine, that were specifically mine, where it wasn't so much about like this very rigid structure in terms of grades. It wasn't sort of like super theoretical or super collaborative. I got to sit down and deal with a lot of the stuff I was coping with at the time, you know, amidst all the stress of matric, like various social concerns, like gender sexuality concerns, all that good stuff that I'm sure everyone who has ever been a teenager has thought about. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out. I still feel like a baby, but I'm a second year now. And I'm super interested in how my two fields like connect, artificial intelligence and art. You have like AI that's now painting in the style of Rembrandt. It's like insane and terrifying. And yeah, I'm just excited about the whole thing.
And Gabby, you mentioned the word terrifying there, and I like it when people get a little bit nervous and terrified. But what is terrifying about visual arts and artificial intelligence? Do you mind just expanding on that a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I mean, for any creative, like this is not, no, everyone knows it's like no creative industry is an easy industry to exist in. And the prospect of your creativity, like people believing that what is such an essential part of yourself can be outsourced to some kind of algorithm, like even if it's not fundamentally true, the fact that people might believe that, you know, that robot you're gonna have to pay less than a person, so we're gonna hire it instead. Like, that is just like, that's the terrifying thing. I don't personally think in our lifetime you will be able to have creatives replaced by AI, but still, who knows? Like, no one knows. That's the thing.
I get you. Thank you for expanding on that. Yes, and it is terrifying. It is very terrifying. And Veliswa, what is your story?
Whew. Like, I have to think back to where I was in matric. Like, why did I do drama? Hello, everybody. Oh, it's so amazing. My heart is so warm, even to see some of the names that are here. It's amazing. Thank you for having me. So, since kind of when I took drama and music, and I just knew that I couldn't do the science. I mean, Gabby, so much respect for what you do. I mean, wow. I just felt like, firstly, I didn't have like a natural skill set for sciences and things like that, and numbers and things. I felt like I was a kid who liked to be outside. I've always been a kid who liked to play sports. And so when I got to Saints, the cultural doors sort of swung open. And there was so much I wanted to do. I mean, from marimba to drama to debating to music to learning an instrument versus using my voice as an instrument. There were so many things that I had the opportunity to do that I'll forever be grateful, you know, to the school for that. And that gave me the space. I chose drama because I love to be on stage, full stop. I like to be a performer. I love to be a performer. I feel like it's a way of expressing truth without having to conform to any standard of communication. And I appreciated that in drama. I appreciated that in music as a subject. And even though so many things were leading to a positive outcome, I was still scared. You know, when matric came, I couldn't back myself. I just felt like if I choose music, I still don't know what I can do with it, which I feel is still a hindrance and a problem that we have in our education system. That people who are in the creative arts feel like there's no career for them, there's no path, there's no solid future financially. So that's all of that really did influence my decision to study law. And so, as I explained when I was at Founders Day, I think it was 2013 or 14 that I had failed at Wits and I was starting again. I graduated, yes. So yeah, after I got my degree, during my degree, I'd started recording and I'd started writing my very first EP. And that's when I realized I could write, really write. And that the things I was saying were so personal, but were felt by so many people, and I could see it in my day-to-day lives, in my friends, my peers at school. This feeling that, you know, Gabby even shared about, you know, you're finding your feet, it's terrifying. Just that, like, leave the subject or whatever you're doing, your career-wise, just figuring out who you are in a world where individuality is cool, but no one really knows what it is. You know, how do we find it, you know? And so when I was writing my first EP during my degree, I did that and I soul-searched and I wrote and I was like, this can help people. And then that's what sparked essentially where I'm at now. Because this whole concept of helping human beings human, because it's hard. And the easiest and most natural and most God-given way that I felt I could help was through my art. And so I chose to sing, and I'm still gonna get on that acting stage. I will act, I'll be in theater, I'm saying it now, into the universe. But my music is way more than just a meditation for myself. I think the entire thing is just, it comes from a place of philanthropy, a place of, I know that it's hard and I know that it's difficult and no one wants to talk about this stuff. And what music does is it gives you a space personally to explore this stuff with this person who is awakening these feelings through what they do. And me then branching into my own music career and now executive producing my own show, LTP Lunchtime Concerts, and starting my own business, Life and Purpose, which is its own registered company, and I now release my own music under myself to protect it, which is something that I took from the law degree. So all the pieces just started to come together, and I started trusting what was my gut. And with the concerts, it's become a platform where I can now help more artists put their work out there to help more people. And that's how I view the whole path. And yeah, that's the story. That's how it started at Saints, and now I'm here, and I still don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years.
What a journey, Vili. So thank you for sharing that with us. And Thando, please do share a bit of your journey. Thando, please unmute yourself.
I'm so sorry. So I matriculated in 2011, and I chose drama because from a very young age, I'd always wanted to perform. So I was born in the US and I lived there until I was 6. And my mom tells me that I started to read at a very, very young age, at around 2. So when she'd take me to the shops, I would read the newspaper headlines for all the customers, and I would just chat to random strangers. So I'd always had that performing thing, and like I'd sing on the bus. So we used the bus there, and I used to sing and perform, and people would watch me. So that's when I developed the performing part of myself. And throughout school, I'd always just been interested in performance, in fiction, in reading. And then by the time I got to grade 10 and it was time to choose a matric subject, I really was serious about wanting to know the theory behind performance and about the history of theater. So that's why I chose drama as a subject. And then I went on to study it. Sorry?
No, I thought you had stopped there. I was going to say, tell us more about your professional life now.
Yes. So I went on to study BA in Theatre and Performance at UCT, and I graduated in 2015. And yeah, so since then I finished my master's in dramaturgy. So I submitted my dissertation at the beginning of this year. So it's still being examined. And after that, and it included an exchange at the University of Amsterdam. So there I got to meet people some more. And I also toured with the Fall internationally. So I got to see how theatre could foster a global community. And yes, that's been my journey so far.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Thando. Wow. And it's so heartwarming to hear about all of your journeys, because I still remember some of you singing in the choir, second alto of Veliswa. I remember that very well. And it's just so amazing to see the growth that has happened and the positive impact you are having on an international level. So thank you very much for sharing that. Now, my next question is around the role of women within the arts. So I'd like to know from you guys, and based on your experience, are women equally represented in the arts? And is there a positive representation or a negative representation? Veliswa.
Oh, you see that last part? That's the punch. You know, but the thing about women and people of color and LGBTQ, I don't know, LGBTQ plus, yes, people who have always been sort of sidelined or marginalized or excluded without information, without knowing, how can you respect, and then how can you appreciate, and then how can you defend? Because that's where I feel like we are. With this cultural appropriation conversation, I stopped having it because I felt like a hypocrite, because here I am shouting at, you know, whomever for wearing Xhosa attire. And I literally, I think in 2007, I'd almost completely forgotten how to speak my own language. I don't know, you know, and I'm at a point where I'm in like my mid-20s and I'm just learning where my people came from, where my great-grandmother's home was, you know, my great-grandfather's home was. What are the things to be proud of? You know, what are the things to take pride in? And I think that especially as South Africans and as Black South Africans, we do not know ourselves enough to be able to stop cultural appropriation, because unless we know ourselves and we know what we're proud of, we'll never be able to ourselves show ourselves to the world and to say, this is us, this is who we are. Do not steal, be who you are. Appreciate, you know, don't take designs and not know what the meaning of that beading is, or the meaning of that material, or that song, or that melody, you know, because cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation is also the conversation that comes in. Because I don't mind if somebody sings in Xhosa because they love the language and they understand every word that's being said and they understand the idioms because they've taken the time. So that shows appreciation. Appropriation, you know, on the other side is literally taken because it looks nice or because it sounds nice and you have no idea where it comes from, its history. And how can we expect other people to go through and do that effort when us ourselves have not done that? You know, and I think through us not doing that, we create an environment where it's easy to steal our culture and portray it any way you would like to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think like on that point, since being in the US, I feel like that cultural appropriation just gets thrown around all the time. And for a minute, I wasn't really certain what exactly it was. I will say, like, I largely grew up going to white schools. And so my understanding of my own culture was based on like, okay, like I understand the language, I can half and half speak the language. And so me trying to understand what my culture is actually started happening because in the US, it seemed like there were more Black people who understood things about their history, about like where their ancestors came from that I was honestly not that sure of. I was like, yeah, I mean, I think there was a privilege that I had in like, well, I presume that everybody was in South Africa. It's just like an assumption, but I didn't take the time to really sit down and think about like, what are the things, what are the rituals that people were engaged in? What were the things that they did? And it came up a lot in my work because in treating people of color, in doing therapy with people of color, it's really important that you incorporate collectivistic cultures and values. And so I had to go back and learn like, what were those collectivistic cultures and values that my specific culture held? And I realized it seemed that there were more people who knew about things that were thousands of years ago. And I was like, well, I took for granted that I was in the place where my family was. And even going back to try and learn that was really difficult because it seemed like even my family was like, I'm not really sure. Like we know the language, but do we know really and truly what the rituals were, what the things that we did were, and how can I treat people if I don't know what mine is, right? Like part of this work is being able to bring yourself into it so that you can treat other people who look like you. And so when people are culturally appropriating, I feel like I was experiencing this like secondhand anger because I was like, well, you shouldn't wear that because dashiki is not part of your culture. You know, like I was just like, it was like a secondhand, this is obviously it's a bad thing, But at the same time, I was like, I don't know what the things are that people took from me, or like, I don't know how to appreciate, or I didn't really learn how to appreciate my stuff so that I know what things I'm protecting and how sacred and beautiful and wonderful they are. So it's a really difficult thing, because I think, and I had this said by a family friend, she said that, you know, in the US, it was, colonization was like people taking people and putting them somewhere else. But in South Africa specifically, it's people came and then they stayed and they ripped our things away, but they stayed there. And then in other cultures, they came and they left, but they left their culture there. And so I feel like Africa is consistently like trying to heal from these things that were taken from us. And at the same time, we've in the process just unlearned just as much as the people who were taken from here. It's been really, I think it's really difficult to appreciate even your own culture if you're not really sure what it is.
Thank you for that, Khumo. And I just want to link what the comments you made now to a question that Taryn Henning, our head of drama, wants to ask. And the question is, what can we as teachers do better in order to assist our students with understanding different cultures, what cultural appropriation is, what cultural appreciation is? What can we as teachers, or what can we as an educational institute do better? Thando.
I think as teachers, or I don't know what teachers can do, but I know what peers can do that are interested, who would like to appreciate the culture, but don't necessarily want to appropriate. And that's to learn more about the culture, and to just be interested in carefully learning and disseminating the knowledge about the culture. Yeah, so I think as teachers, I think it's also about, as an individual, how are you appreciating the culture? Are you interested in the culture that you want to teach people about? So yeah, that's
perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Veliswa.
It really can be as simple as, you know, a project. Like one that I heard of with little kids, I think they were like 7s or something. And they were tasked by their teacher or whatever it was to go home and essentially create a project that explains or tells us about your culture, from the food to how you dress, to what your language is, what do you call your granny, what do you call your grandpa? And because you'd be surprised that it's not the technical stuff like, how does one get married? It's not the big questions that lead to the ignorance. It's the small things, the not knowing your language, just the not knowing, why does my mom wear that thing every time she goes home? You know, why do we eat this food? Because you just grow up eating like pap and mukhodu, but you don't know that you actually eat pap and mukhodu because mukhodu comes from, you know, probably umsebenzi, and why, you know, things happen in families. Because the reason why, well, the gift that teachers have is unlocking those conversations at home by giving projects like that out, or asking questions like that, and incorporating a person's culture within the work. So go and choose a drama piece that speaks to your culture. And if you can't find it, it's a problem, you know, and that's identified. Now you can have Thando who can go and write a piece when she now graduates, because she realized through, you know, that class session that actually aren't a lot of pieces that are in Xhosa and Zulu and, you know, Nguni languages. So unlocking the conversation at home, I think teachers, or at school and at home, is what teachers can do, just by literally the small things, just kids dig a little deeper to their history, to where they're coming from, who they are, and making them have those conversations at home, because the research will come from them. You know, where did grandma come from? They have to go ask their parents, and then you'll challenge the parents, now have to go research, you know? So I think it can start a really great chain reaction, just the small things.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah. Khumo?
To go off of that, I think that, you know, what Veliswa was saying makes a lot of sense, right? I think part of making it an even more important thing and a more something that's easier to internalize is that you're tasking the children with going home and finding it out from their family, as opposed to let me teach you about your culture. I think there's something very different about hearing a story from your grandmother, which is like a largely you know, a lot of the time African cultures bring stories down from our elders, and so to hear it from a teacher versus to hear it from a family member is so much greater. And I think, you know, part of modeling like a good understanding of culture and yourself is also deconstructing your own narratives about the children that you're in the presence of too. I think something that I'd noticed when we were in school was that there were very like distinct groups of people, and no, people were not always together. We weren't always kind of learning from each other, learning about each other. And I think that there's so much that teachers can do to facilitate conversations between kids from different places, because there are children who come from Soweto, who come from Kailicha, who come from, you know, so many different places, and you have the opportunity to bring those people together, but also to make sure that you're not making someone a spokesperson for something, right? So like trying to create a diversity of cultures and narratives about what it's like to be a part of one culture or another culture is a really great way of kind of helping kids to even facilitate those conversations themselves with their families.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Khumo. Wow. And I just got a question for Gabby. Gabby, as you might all know, actually designed the image of what a saint school is, those 3 girls that we now use now. And I would like to know from Gabby, how do you use your artwork as a visual artist to break down stereotypes?
I don't know if you're going to like my response to this question because I look back at that that drawing that I did, and I was in matric, and I was like, transformation, diversity, and I look at that and I say, this was me like tokenizing individuals from saints, like Khumo was saying, like making people spokespeople, pretending that, certainly perhaps not pretending it's something that it's not, but pretending that things were perfect, or that Saints was an entirely inclusive community. And I think we can all admit that it wasn't. I assume isn't, but perhaps something is like, there's been a fundamental change. And since that point, I now try to, I use my art in like promoting diversity and inclusion by being humble about it, by going, I actually don't have the answers. And I think that's like, I guess this is kind of linking back to the previous question about, you know, what educators can do. And I think I think it's a fundamental flaw, less in like educational strategy and more just in the system, that students aren't taught that it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to be humble. So you have to pretend that you have all the answers. And I think that's where you slip up very, very badly. So I'm just trying to represent what I know and what I feel, and not try represent something that I could never possibly understand.
Wow, thank you very much for that insight. And it's amazing to see how you are acknowledging how different you were as a high school student, and also just seeing and tracking your journey and actually learning within the process as well, and admitting to some things that you don't agree with now when you look back at your artwork. So thank you for that, Gabby. This is just a general announcement to everyone who's on this call. Please do feel free to type in questions in the chat box. And yeah, please do engage with us in that sense. And we don't bite, I promise. It's all virtual. So please, everyone on the call, please do add your questions to the chat box, and we will direct them to our different panelists. Now, the one thing I'd like to know from Veliswa, as a singer and as a performer, and I'm using you because you're the musician in the room here, is what are your views on, and this goes back again to the representation of women. And this is a discussion that I've been having with some of my students as well. And it is as follows. Do you think that an artist like Ms. Cardi B, who has now released the hit song called WAP, do you think that is a positive representation of females, or is it a negative representation of females? I just want to know what your viewpoint is as a musician. Would you feel comfortable getting onto stage and going, yeah, to that song?
Trap question, Richard. Nothing in the creative arts is binary. Nothing.
Yes. Yep.
So, you know, I actually really loved Cardi when she came out. Like, I was like, this girl is kicking in the door, okay? She doesn't care. And I've always struggled with it because I myself as a singer and as an artist, how I choose to portray myself as Venus, as a performer and as a brand is way the other spectrum. So I understand that my own unconscious bias that I might have, my own, you know, social agents have entrenched how I believe, you know, a woman is seen to be respected, or, you know, how a woman should carry herself, you know. But I think the growth, I think, in myself socially is that I'm not going to say it's a good or a bad thing, because there are some women that take empowerment from the work that she gives out, and that empowerment turns into a positive thing through them and through what they choose to do with that feeling that they get from songs like that. Like my friends from Saints love trap, like love trap. And that's never gonna stop, you know? So I've always, even in school, I grew up with it. So as a genre, I've learned to appreciate the space that it takes, the feelings that it creates. But it's tricky because rather than saying, oh, she's a negative representation and no one should be like that, it's a question of, especially with women, because of how layered we are, there's always a reason to why things are done the way that they are done, especially when they are done by women and when they are done and everybody's watching. So Cardi B as a brand decided that as a brand, she is that brand. I used to be a stripper. I'm, you know, tattoos and, you know, legs out and bums out and everything. And so obviously that persona, that brand is going to come through the music as well. So it's sort of like she's been dedicated since she came in. She was like, this is who I am. This is the kind of image. This is the kind of brand. This is the kind of thinking that I initiate with my music. And she's remaining consistent. What I have as a choice as a woman is whether I want to indulge in that music and listen to it, which I choose not to, because it doesn't feed me. It doesn't feed what I have classified as, you know, my femininity and how to express it. It's just not me, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong. You know, but at the same time, you know, you got to think about kids. So are they seeing this and thinking this is how women should be, this is what women need to be? And if that's what they're seeing, then all we need to do as our responsibility as women in the creative arts is to create a different picture, not to shut down what's being portrayed and what's popular, but to create a new popular, a more positive, a more, you know, a different popular, you know, and create an image of a woman that challenges what is in our faces and shoved in our faces by media and by music, such as Cardi B's songs. So I think if anything, it fuels me to get myself out there and get the other artists, the other women that I know who I relate to more in their femininity and how they choose to show it and how they choose to respect it and command others to respect it. You know, I surround myself with queens, so I need to give my kids and, you know, the kids that are there, kids that are to come, like my kids, an image that is of a queen. And this is what I think a queen is. This is what, you know, these creatives, these women portray as what a queen is. But if you feel like Cardi B is a queen right now, I'm not going to say no. Maybe that's how you see your queendom. But the main thing is you need to see yourself as a queen and not, like, that must be the premise. See yourself not as a second-class citizen, not as someone who has to work harder to gain the same level of respect as anyone else. Because especially as Black women, we exert ourselves a lot and we put a lot of extra effort where it's not needed to sort of prove ourselves constantly. And it would be great to have an image where that didn't need to be done, that I was enough. And I think that's our responsibility to counter, you know, that kind of culture that's happening now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Veliswa, and thank you for answering that so honestly as well. Yes, Queen, yes. Woohoo. Thando, this is a question from Taryn Henning, and she would like to know, your play, The Fall, addresses quite a controversial issue that was happening and is still happening in South Africa at the time. Fees must fall. The question is, what was it like to create a piece of theatre based on such a controversial issue? And did you feel pressured in to do the piece and the issue justice?
So I think the process for creating The Fall, it was difficult at first because there were 8 writers and we all had different experiences. And so to tackle such a controversial topic, it's like you have to mix your own feelings about where you stand with Fees Must Fall and with other people's views and accommodate other people's views because you're working together to create a play. So I think that's also where pressure comes in, because as someone who has a certain viewpoint on Fees Must Fall, you feel pressured to stand your ground in your defense, or whether you're defending it or you're against it or you're in the middle. You feel like you need to defend your stance. And yeah, you do feel pressured because these are also people's experiences at university, or people that you may have known, or people that you may have met. So there is that urgency or pressure. And I think we dealt with it by being open to people outside the rehearsal room. So we interviewed people, we talked to the people that we could to create something that was well researched and that we felt could represent everybody.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Thando. Thank you. And this is a question from Melissa Harrison, and I'm sure some of you, Thando, Khumo, and Veliswa will remember her, who also works within the arts field here. And this question is directed to anyone, actually. So if you please do feel free to ask. The question is, do you think that the South African voice in theatre and in art is being watered down by international trends and fads? Or do you think that they fuel each other in a positive way to create this new term that we love using, a global village? So do you think that the South African voice has been watered down by international fads? Or do you think they fuel each other in a positive way to create a global village? Who would like to answer that?
I have a thought.
Yes.
I'm not like entirely in the arts industry right now, but I do think that, you know, it speaks to something that's really important about community, because community is made of different people, but different people need to feel valuable within themselves first before they can come into a community to create something like diversity. And so I think that I don't necessarily think that it's being watered down, but I do think that other countries, other cultures have had the chance to make their mark in the world. And so them being included in other things, for instance, like American music and arts is like already so ingrained in our cultures already, so they don't necessarily need to make a name for themselves because they're already just a part of everything. So I think that in that same way, South Africa is still creating its name in the art industry, and I think there is value in first nurturing our cultures and ourselves before we come into this space. So like the idea of a global village is all well and good, but first, to make a village, you need individual people who have come into their own. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that, you know, there's something really important about South Africa creating itself, and I think we're in the process of doing that. We're, you know, like making our name, and like Black Panther and like all these other cool things slowly. But I think part of it is like, I think there is value in first, you know, turning into and nurturing our own things before kind of making our way in there.
Perfect, thank you. And Khumo, while you still have the mic, I just want to ask you a question around the work that you do and the people that you work with, the LGBTQIA plus community. And I would like to ask you, how are members of the LGBTQ plus community represented in the arts? And my question, I'm going to expand further on that, and is, are they portrayed as a stereotype? And I think of Modern Family, you have the effeminate Cam. In there, is it a positive representation? Is it all stereotypical? And yeah, so just that representation, does it sit well with you as a practicing clinical psychotherapist?
Oof. I think there is so much complexity in sexuality and gender, but it seems like as a society, the only way that we can accept queer people is when they're hyper-feminizing or hyper-masculinizing themselves. It feels like there has to be okay, like if I'm a gay man, I must hyper-feminize myself, which is its own conversation because sexuality and gender presentation are very different. But I think that in the arts, you know, this way of how do we accept gay people is to put them there in the most hyper-feminine way possible so that we can create some kind of comedy or some kind of story. Because the story of the gay man who doesn't necessarily hyper-feminize himself, who just looks like your everyday Joe, is not really a story. So I think sometimes the arts can really it's great for representation in some ways, but in other ways it can kind of not dehumanize, but it makes it hard for a person to actualize themselves within the community because they don't see themselves on TV. You see a gay man, but you see a hyper-feminine gay man, or you see a lesbian woman, but you see a hyper-masculine lesbian woman. So feminine lesbian women are not represented. And so it starts to become really difficult to see yourself, even as a queer person, in media, in the arts, if the only thing that they're presenting are the ones that are socially acceptable, which is a hyper-feminine gay man or a hyper-masculine lesbian woman. And I do think that, you know, there's so much complexity in gender and sexuality. No queer, you can't, this is why like the idea of like something like a gaydar really gives me stress, because you can't identify a gay or a lesbian person, because that means you're using what they look like to identify something, how they act, how they talk, how they, whatever it is, when that has nothing to do with their sexuality. And I think in South Africa, it feels like there is this push for queer folks to hyper queer themselves in spaces so that people know who they are, because it's really hard to feel validated without showing people your sexuality or your gender in some capacity. So I think that the arts could really do a lot more to kind of expand on our perceptions of queerness, because, you know, even like Black people, like if it's a story, it must be a story about really hard experience of growing up Black in the township. When it's like, not really. Like, yes, but also there's other stories. And I think that, you know, it doesn't have to be the story. It can just be, there's a Black girl in high school living her life, and that's it, right? Like, I think we focus so much on trying to, when we want to do representation, we want to like make a story out of the person, when just let them be, just like every other white person in your story gets to just be, just like straight people get to just be, you know, people who conform to the cis, straight, heterosexual, whatever idea of what the world is like, get to just be. So allow other people to just be without them having to be a story or like having to prove themselves to some people. So I guess all that to say, we could do more to, you know, kind of more complexly show the experiences of different identities.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I so agree with you. Thank you. And Alyssa Harrison also agrees with you, Khumo, there. This is a question from one of our grade 10 drama students, Sydney. And this is an open-ended question, so please, anyone feel free to answer. How do you think one in the arts can protest against societal issues such as racism, prejudice, and the role of women? How do you think one in the arts can protest against societal issues such as racism, prejudice, and the role of women?
I think I won't even, yeah, okay. I think the most important thing and the most valuable thing a creative can do is tell their truth without sounding like a cliche. Yeah. Literally telling stories of your experiences and how you're experiencing this life thing that's happening to us right now. Because especially in this time, being alive in this time, I mean, I don't know how you know, but we're going into a new age next year, which means we're literally, it's insane, the time that we're living in, I'm just gonna say it. So everything we're experiencing and everything you take in as a creative, you have the responsibility to express that, right? And in that responsibility, that's how you protest. Because what you're doing is you're saying, this is how I feel about a certain thing. This is my perspective. And anyone who agrees with me will be able to relate and to my work. And that's all, you know, a creative, I feel, as a creative, that's all I want. My goal is always to not, you know, enjoy this art on my own. It's to make a statement and to make people think. So if you are thinking and you express that in your creativity and what you produce through that creativity, you encourage others to think and to think well for themselves, you know, and that I feel is what is an underlying problem to all of these surface issues, GBV, racism, all of these things. It's the fact that human beings don't know how to human because they don't know how to think well for themselves. And creatives have an ability to admit that they can't think well for themselves, share that, and allow people to admit that they can't think well for themselves, to stop the process for them to think well for themselves. You know, so it's the responsibility to tell your story so that others are brave enough to ask themselves questions that will make them a better person. And then society changes with the one person, one at a time.
Perfect, thank you so much. Another question coming in from our grade 10 drama student, Rachel here, and I'm going to throw this question towards Thando as an actress and also to Khumo based on the work that you do. The question is, since theatre is used to bring light to discrimination, for example, discrimination against members of the LGBTQI+ community, would it be insensitive for a straight female actress to play the role of a lesbian non-binary, seeing as it could be seen as misrepresentation by some? Thando.
Well, I think it wouldn't be insensitive, but it would be quite a tricky action to defend, I think, because the experiences, I mean, one has privileges as a straight person in society, and yeah, I think that to take on the struggles of someone from the LGBTQIA+ community without having experienced them yourself, or without casting someone to play that role, it would be, I would rather just cast someone who who can represent that.
Khumo?
I think, you know, if it's like an issue of like casting, if you are cast in this role, then I agree. I think that there is really like part of bringing light to discrimination against these communities is to uplift them. And that means pointing people in the direction of, in some way, finding somebody who can do it. I think that's part of like uplifting communities. But I think that, you know, if, for instance, it's something like, because I remember like we used to do monologues, and, you know, like it was things that were just like for class, and kind of you find a story that you connect to, and, you know, you portray it in the best way that you can, in the same way that you would want to fully understand the experience of something, whether it's talking to somebody whose experience that is. I think that might be the best way to go about it, is to try and find out how you can most authentically portray this experience. Though I agree, like I think it's a very tricky thing, because the experience is so specific, in the sense that like the Black experience is very specific, you know, a woman's experience is very specific. And in the same way, queer identities are a very specific experience, and it can be exceptionally difficult, especially even in kind of thinking about like playing a lesbian non-binary person. It is such a specific experience that if by chance you have access to a person whose experience this is, and they would be open to sharing that with you, then I think that would be the best way to go about it. But at the same time, I think, you know, part of when I was even doing this work in drama, I was trying to find things that I connected to, right? So I think also internalizing, like, what am I doing this for? Why do you want to play this specific part? Is there something about it that you connect to, right? Because I think that, you know, Peter and Taryn and Richard really did this really great thing of, you know, making us think about what do you connect to, what feels like you, and trying to find out how you can portray yourself through this character. That's part of doing this work, right? It's part of being in theaters. You know, what about this feels like me, and how can I portray this experience in that way? So even if, you know, if this is a character that you're picking based on like a monologue or something like that, then finding out like, what is it about this that connects to me? Does it connect to you, or is it about the identities themselves? Is it the story that the person is telling? And I think really, you know, thinking about how much justice can you give to this experience, because it is a very specific one. And at the same time, gender and sexuality are very complex. And so there's a lot to think about when thinking about, you know, kind of portraying this kind of character.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I am aware of the time, and I'm getting pings from my phone from my colleague saying that it's time to wrap up. And I wish we could continue with this conversation for longer. And it's all of the points that are coming out. I'm learning so much from you guys. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for teaching us more about some of the misconceptions that we could have. Gabby, my last question to you is as follows. We are all aware that sometimes within a school setting, and I'm fully aware of my biases as well within the job that I have within the school, is that the visual arts is often not in the spotlight. We always highlight our drama students, our music students, and I'm sure you can relate to all of that. So what can we as a school do based on your experience to actually lift the profile of the visual arts more within the school community? Yes, we do have art exhibitions. We do highlight our students on social media and on Founders Day for artworks, but how can we do it better?
Yeah, that is a tricky question, because look, fundamentally, from what I saw, like the artwork that a student makes is like any art form. It's extremely personal. It's like a personal meditation, and often it's much more visually jarring than a lot of other like performance types can be. And that's with things like I know for like my final project, I painted a bunch of like the female nude and stuff like that, and for that reason I remember so clearly at our final art exhibition, parents looking at the drawings that I had done, and like I saw them sort of kind of doing this, right? Like so in a way, I wouldn't want it to become this like massive thing where you go there to like learn the tea about your fellow classmates, because like I used to put so much personal stuff into my visual journals and things. And the fact that it was such a personal thing was important, and that there was still a degree of privacy. Like you had to dig very deep and take the time with my work to engage with that. That being said, I think the culture, it's about the culture of a school, right? You can't force people to do things. They don't like you, if it's mandatory to go to an art exhibition, that's not going to make people like or appreciate art more. I think it's just in conversation in the classroom, just like use an artwork as a reference piece for what you're talking about. Like in English, like this is an artwork that's, you know, that links to the topic we're talking about. Let's talk about the artwork. And we did this to a large extent, but like take it into everything, because things are fundamentally interconnected. You know, photography is, and the camera is based on physics. Like it's all about like how light refracts. Like look at that, like integrate. That would be my 2 cents.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I am aware of the time. It is now 7:15. And I just want to say a huge thank you to our 4 panelists, Gabby, Veliswa, Thando, and Khumo. Your insights have been invaluable, and just thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your journeys with us. So if we're all live, I'd say, can we please give them a round of applause? We are going to be having a follow-up event next year, and hoping that none of the COVID restrictions or the cases rise, we are hoping that we can actually have all 3 of all of you, and Gabby, if you're still here, and Kuma, maybe you can just pop down for a visit to see your old school and some family members. And hopefully that we can actually entice you to perform, and you can actually just continue this conversation further. So thank you very much to all of you for joining in this evening. We look forward to answering more of your questions next year. So students who have been typing questions in the chat box, please keep them. I know that we could continue these conversations in the classroom as well. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you for the conversation, and a big thank you to Ms. Miles, who was the brainchild behind this initiative. She had to pop out because we are actually opening up a tolerance artwork on campus, and she's there. A big thank you to my colleague and fellow drama queen, Mrs. Taryn Henning, for being the admin queen and for arranging everything with all of the panelists. And just thank you to everyone for taking time out of your evening to join in and to ask such valuable and rich questions. So thank you very much. Drive safe, but have an awesome evening, and we so look forward to seeing you in our studio theatre live. And yeah, because we've been waiting in the wings for quite some time now. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a good evening.